You know that moment where everything goes deathly quiet, like the universe is holding its breath, right before someone says something so unhinged it physically alters your DNA? Yeah, that was our living room when my sister said the words, "I'm pregnant." You'd think she'd announced she was moonlighting as a drug mule or had joined a cult that worshipped Ant and Dec, but no, just pregnant, at 22. With a job, a flat, a functioning uterus. The horror. Dad went red instantly, like boiled gammon red. And then, with all the subtlety of a Daily Mail headline, he roared, "You're no daughter of mine." Honestly, I half expected him to follow it up with, "And may God strike me down where I stand," like he was in some biblical West End revival. Mom? She did that shaky teacup thing, hand trembling like she'd just heard the Queen was stepping down and Meghan was taking over. She whispered, "How could you?" as if my sister had personally called in a bomb threat to the WI bake sale. Meanwhile, I was sat on the sofa eating a mini roll thinking, hang on, didn't you have me at 20? In a council flat? With no hot water and a husband who still thought foreplay was changing the bed sheets? But sure, let's crucify the modern woman for having a child slightly out of sync with your imaginary moral compass. And then came the classics. You've ruined your life. You've brought shame to this family. We didn't raise you like this. At which point I nearly choked on my mini roll. Because what exactly did they raise her like? Dad once grounded me for 3 weeks for forgetting to microwave his peas. Mom cried when I said, I didn't want to go to church because I was 12 and already knew hell was real. It was called Year 8 PE. Anyway, back to the chaos. My sister, brave, broken, and blinking back tears, just sat there, holding her belly like it might shield her from their bile. No one asked who the father was. No one asked if she was okay. It was all just shame, scandal, and how dare you bring this filth into our home. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just sat back, arms folded, and let the show play out. Because arguing with them is like trying to explain feminism to a brick wall with a Sky subscription. At one point, Mum genuinely said, "What will the neighbors think?" As if the pinnacle of morality lives in number 42, where Gavin regularly screams at the cat and Angela's on her 4th husband, who looks suspiciously like her 2nd. In the end, Dad stood up, all puffed chest and righteousness, pointed at the door and said, "You can leave. You're not welcome here," which would have been dramatic if he wasn't still wearing his novelty slippers that say, King of the Grill. So yeah, that was the night my sister got disowned for daring to create life. While I sat there realizing that, in this family, compassion has a curfew and hypocrisy wears a cardigan. God bless the British nuclear family, eh? So they kicked her out. Proper full performance style. 2. Like she was a contestant on Strictly Come. Judgment and had cha-cha'd her way into eternal disgrace. Mum sobbed into her dressing gown like she was starring in a wartime drama. And Dad stood there like a Poundland Pontius Pilate, washing his hands of it all, minus the dignity and historical relevance. And with that, my sister, 6 months pregnant, carrying more weight than just the baby, mind you, was booted out. No discussion, no empathy, just get out, because apparently nothing says loving family quite like emotional exile with a side of passive aggression. So who did she call? Not the baby's father, shocker. He'd legged it the moment she whispered late period. Not any extended family either. They'd all gone quiet faster than a WhatsApp group. After someone suggests splitting the bill evenly, she called me. Of course she did. Because when you've exhausted all your options, you turn to the one person you know is too emotionally constipated to say no. She showed up at mine just before 11 p.m. Rain pouring like a pathetic fallacy straight out of a Year 10 English essay. She was soaked, mascara down to her jaw, clutching a knackered suitcase and looking like the ghost of bad decisions past. And me? I answered the door in my pajamas and a crisp-stained dressing gown that had seen better decades. I stared at her belly, then her face, then her belly again, and thought, right, this is happening then. I let her in, obviously, because I'm a mug, a doormat with tea-making skills and unresolved childhood trauma. And the worst part? I didn't even hesitate, because somewhere deep inside my emotionally battered soul, I still believed in family, or at least in not letting a pregnant woman sleep in a bus stop. She collapsed onto my sofa like someone had unplugged her from the mains, and just whispered, they really meant it. And I just stood there, arms crossed, heart aching, thinking, of course they did. They always do. Mom and Dad love a bit of martyrdom. The whole "we gave you everything" narrative, except the actual love, or support, or patience, or, human decency. They can't afford therapy, so they inflict guilt instead. Like they'll scream, "You've betrayed us." But if you dare suggest that maybe throwing your daughter out mid-pregnancy isn't exactly textbook parenting, they'll cry victim so hard you'd think they were nominated for a BAFTA. Meanwhile, I'm the fallback plan. The forgotten sibling, the side character in everyone else's emotional saga. And I've learned to accept that my role is mostly emergency, contact/emotional bin. But even then I made up the spare bed. Put the kettle on, fetched a towel, said, "You're safe here," because someone bloody had to. So there I was, 20-something, flat in disarray. No savings, no clue. Just me, my knocked-off electric heater, and now a pregnant sister sleeping in the box room. And all I could think was, I didn't sign up for this, but I'll still show up for her. Because unlike the people who raised us, I haven't completely outsourced my empathy to the Daily Mail. Sister's pregnant. Parents are dramatic. I'm tired, underpaid, and now playing midwife/life coach with a side of existential crisis. Someone get me a sainthood. Or failing that, a sarcasm trophy. Preferably one shaped like a wine bottle and engraved with, "Congratulations on once again, cleaning up everyone else's mess." Look, I don't know who needs to hear this, but pregnancy, it doesn't end at the announcement. It's not just a dramatic scene in your parents' living room where Dad goes full Shakespeare and Mum clutches her pearls like she's just heard a swear word on songs of praise. No. There's more. Cravings, hormones, unexpected nosebleeds, things leaking. Appointments where strange women put jelly on your sister's stomach and say things like, "Oh, there's the femur," as if that's not a terrifying sentence. And me, Googling how to fold a pram without setting it on fire, and or emotionally imploding, while my sister cried because her Greg's sausage roll tasted like betrayal. Honestly, the NHS should issue medals. She was scared. Properly scared. Not the cute kind, like, "Oh no, what if I forget the nappies?" But the full existential dread kind. She'd stare at her belly like it was ticking. And I didn't blame her. She was 22, single, disowned, and living in my glorified shoebox of a flat, where the heating made weird clicking noises, and the kettle judged us with every boil. She was also on occasion feral. Hormones turned her into a strange, Victorian ghost child, who'd cry over dropped toast and then try to bite me for suggesting decaf. I once found her sobbing because the baby kicked during Strictly. He doesn't like Anton Dubek. Right, okay, sure. Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together. I was broke, overworked, sharing my flat with a human incubator who had commandeered every soft surface for her swollen ankles, functioning entirely on coffee, sarcasm, and the kind of fragile hope you only find at the bottom of a reduced Tesco meal deal. I hadn't had a proper night's sleep since she moved in, mostly because she snored like a badger with asthma, but also because I kept waking up thinking, what if I ruin everything? But we made it work. Kind of. In the way a dodgy IKEA wardrobe works, if you lean it against a wall and don't look at it too hard. And then the baby arrived. I say arrived, he launched. My sister screamed so loudly the midwife winced, and the baby came out looking absolutely livid to be here. Red, squashed, covered in goo, basically. Looked like the ghost of our mother's disappointment had been reincarnated in baby form. And you know what? I loved him. Immediately. I don't mean in some cheesy, oh my god, instant maternal bond sort of way. I mean, I looked at this angry little ball of noise, mucus and unmet expectations, and thought, you tiny screaming potato, you've wrecked my life, and I would absolutely commit murder to keep you safe. Which is unsettling. Because no one warns you that love sometimes feels like dread wrapped in devotion, with a strong undercurrent of, oh god, what now? And it wasn't even my baby. But I'd fed him, talked to him, folded his ridiculous tiny socks, Googled, can a baby get stuck sideways at 3 a.m. with genuine panic? So yeah. I was in it, and there he was, my nephew, screaming like he'd been personally betrayed by existence. And I stood there, exhausted, mascara smudged, smelling faintly of stale Wotsits, thinking, well, guess we're doing this now. And honestly, it was the most terrifying, messy, beautiful thing I've ever accidentally fallen into. So here's a fun little plot twist no one warned me about. You take in your pregnant sister for a bit, help with a few nappy changes, and before you know it, you've basically become someone's mum. Not officially, obviously. I wasn't knighted by CBeebies or anything. But unofficially, Oh, I was deep in it. Nappies, bottles, wiping puke off my Primark pajamas at 2 a.m. Like it's a normal Tuesday night. Singing lullabies in the dark, off-key, half asleep. Like a dying pigeon doing karaoke in a haunted pub. My sister, bless her, she tried. She really did. But postpartum depression is a beast. Not a cute, sad montage like they show in dramas. I mean a full-blown, soul-eating fog that turns getting dressed into an Olympic event. She'd sit on the sofa, baby in one arm, tears in the other, staring at the telly like she was watching static and trying to feel something. Sometimes she'd say he deserves better. And I'd say, he's literally eating his own foot right now. I think he's fine. So I stepped up. Because that's what you do, right? When the world falls apart, you just patch it with biscuits and stubbornness. I started doing nursery runs in my ancient Ford Fiesta that smelled faintly of despair and spilt Ribena. Wrote snack on 10 different Tupperwares like I knew what I was doing. Sat through playdates in overpriced cafes. Surrounded by mum groups. The ones with shiny prams and shinier lives. You know the type. All double-barreled surnames, organic rice cakes, and toddlers called Elspeth or Maximus. They spoke in baby voice to each other and used words like weaning journey without irony. Meanwhile, I rocked up with my niece in one arm, Tesco bag in the other, wearing yesterday's leggings and smelling of dry shampoo and existential dread. One of them asked me once, all soft and patronizing, "So, how long have you been nannying?" And I very nearly said, "Since the patriarchy collapsed and left me to do everyone's emotional labor." But I just smiled and went, "Oh, a while. Why correct them? It was easier that way. Let them think I was the help. At least nannies get paid." I was 20-something, knackered. Hadn't shaved my legs since the baby was born, and my main diet was cold toast and leftover Ella's kitchen pouches. The baby knew my scent better than my own shadow. He called me Mum once, just casually while reaching for a banana. And my heart shattered and melted and exploded all at once. And then I cried in the cleaning aisle at Sainsbury's because apparently that's what love does now. It ambushes. You next to the multi-surface sprays. But the thing is, I didn't mind. Not really, because in between the chaos and nappies and mental breakdowns in Lidl car parks, I was raising a real human. I was doing the thing. It wasn't glamorous. No Instagram-worthy mumfluencer nonsense. Just me, a baby, and a never-ending pile of laundry that may or may not have developed its own consciousness. So yeah, plot twist. I became mummish. Not by choice, not by birth, but by sheer bloody circumstance. And I wore that role like I wore everything else in life. With gritted teeth, dry humor, and a scrunchie that seemed too much. You'd think, after throwing their pregnant daughter out like expired milk, my parents might have followed it up with, I don't know, a shred of guilt? A phone call? A text message typed out in all caps because Mum still thinks caps lock is more sincere. But nope, nothing. Not a card. Not a call. Not even a snarky little hope you're well text post on Facebook. Sandwiched between stolen quotes about forgiveness and blurry photos of her bloody begonias. Just pure, uninterrupted silence. Which, funnily enough, has always been their favorite parenting method. Right after emotional blackmail. And sweeping it under the rug until everyone dies. Honestly, it hurt, which is annoying, because I knew better. I knew they'd rather pretend. We'd vanished off the face of the earth than admit they might have handled things poorly. Still, there was this tiny, unhinged part of me that clung to the fantasy. You know the one. One day they'll come round. They'll knock on the door, tearfully apologize, admit they were wrong. Mum will hand over a lasagna. Dad will say, "We missed you." It'll be a whole BBC Christmas special. Cue emotional music. Roll credits. Spoiler, that didn't happen. What happened instead was 3 years of radio silence so deafening it echoed. Birthdays, ignored. Baby's first steps? Didn't ask. My birthday? Completely ghosted. Not even a pity card with a voucher for W.H. Smith. And yeah, I told myself I didn't care. That we didn't need them. That our little trio, me, my sister, and her tiny scream goblin of a child and was enough. And most days it was. But there were nights, dark ones, where I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how two people could shut off. Their love like a light switch. Just click. You disappoint us. You're dead to us. No discussion. No room for growth. Just passive-aggressive silence and the occasional vague post on Facebook about kids these days. And I hated that it still got to me. That I could survive on microwave meals and 5 hours of broken sleep. But one accidental glimpse of Dad's profile picture could send me spiraling into a pit of what did I do wrong? You know what it's like, right? When you've got just enough trauma to be functional but still flinch. When someone raises their voice near the kettle. Yeah, that. So we carried on. Me playing mum-ish, my sister trying to rebuild herself from the ground up, and the baby growing into a wild little tornado who thought I hung the moon. And we made our own little world. No grandparents, no family dinners, no forced fun. Just us, messy, tired, broke, and weirdly content. And then, of course, just when I'd finally stopped holding my breath, they showed up. Because that's the thing about people like my parents. They don't reach out when you're drowning. But once you've built a raft and started sailing, they appear, all shocked and wounded like, "Oh, we didn't know you were doing so well. Why didn't you call?" Right, because obviously it was my job to apologize for being emotionally exiled. So yeah, spoiler, they didn't change. Not really, but they did come back, eventually. And when they did, well, let's just say, it didn't go quite how they'd pictured it. 3 years. That's how long it had been. 3 whole years of radio silence, emotional Cold War, and awkward family gossip that somehow always managed to reach my ears third hand, via Auntie Pat's dodgy group chats. By now, the baby had graduated from blob with arms to fully sentient chaos gremlin. He had opinions. Strong ones. He hated socks. Loved toast. Was in a committed relationship with Peppa Pig, which frankly concerns me. Because if I have to hear "I'm Peppa Pig" snort snort one more time, I will actually start gnawing through plasterboard. But life, weirdly, was good. We had a nicer place. Not fancy, but it didn't smell like damp and despair, which is a win. There was always noise and crumbs and questionable stains on the carpet, but also laughter. And snacks. Always snacks. The kind of home you trip over Lego in but still feel safe. Anyway, it was a Tuesday. I remember because the bin men were late. The toddler had hidden my keys in the fridge, and I was already one stress meltdown away from applying for citizenship in Narnia. Then, ding dong. Now, I'm not a spiritual person, but something in my soul went, "Oh, fuck off." I opened the door in leggings, toast in my hair, child on hip like some frazzled depiction of modern motherhood, painted by a hungover art student. And there they were. Mum, pearls, pressed blouse, expression set to mild concern and judgment. Dad, arms folded, face like he'd just been made to walk past a Greg's without going in. My whole body stiffened. You know that fight or flight response. Yeah. I got stuck somewhere between slam the door and throw a rice cake like a ninja star. I blinked. They blinked. The toddler sneezed. For a split second, I genuinely thought I'd hallucinated them. Like maybe I'd finally snapped and imagined my childhood trauma in 3D. But no, they were real. On my actual doorstep, looking slightly older, slightly smaller, and very, very awkward. Mum smiled. That tight, forced smile she usually reserves for neighbors she secretly hates. "Hello, love," she said, as if she hadn't ignored every milestone for 3 bloody years. Dad just grunted. He's always had the emotional range of a wet sponge, so that was probably him trying. And me? I stood there, holding a jam-covered toddler who was now licking my shoulder. And I swear to God the only thought I had was, I cannot deal with this while Peppa Pig is paused mid-oink in the living room. I almost shut the door. Pure reflex. Because when you spend years healing from people, your nervous system doesn't get the memo that they've turned up, dressed like it's Sunday lunch. But I didn't. Not because I was ready. Not because I'd forgiven them. Just because the toddler shouted, "Who dat?" like some sort of bouncer, and then loudly farted in their direction. Which honestly was the most accurate greeting they were ever going to get. So I opened the door a little wider, not wide enough for comfort, just enough for tension, and I said, calmly, quietly, like the composed adult I occasionally pretend to be, "Well, look who remembered we exist." Mum's eyes went glossy. Dad looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. And Peppa started oinking again from the TV. Honestly, perfect timing. Right. So we're standing in my doorway. Me, toast in my hair, toddler on hip, Peppa Pig playing what sounds suspiciously like George's Big Balloon Catastrophe in the background. And Mum starts crying. Well, I say crying. It was less grief-stricken, and more I'm trying to win BAFTA for most. Convincing a strange parent. The kind of dabbing your eyes motion where the tears don't actually fall, but the guilt-tripping rains down like biblical punishment. "Oh, sweetheart," she sniffled, voice cracking on cue. "We've missed you both so much." She said it like she was the victim of a natural disaster. like she'd been torn from our lives by a great cosmic injustice. And not, her own actions. Meanwhile, Dad stood there looking like someone had asked him to smile in a passport photo. Arms crossed, eyes squinting like he was trying to make out whether I was an illusion or just, God forbid, doing well without him. I didn't say anything at first, mostly because I was holding a child who had just announced loudly that he needed a wee and didn't mind doing it on any available surface. Also because I was too busy processing the absolute audacity of it all. 3 years. 3 actual years of silence. And now they were here, on my doorstep, playing the nostalgia. Greatest hits album like we'd just had a little tiff over the Christmas pudding. Not full-blown abandonment during a pregnancy. Mind you, just a silly misunderstanding. Oopsie daisy. Happens to the best of us. Then Dad cleared his throat. That classic dad move. Like it physically pained him to speak. He muttered, "We thought maybe it was time to reconnect." Right. Reconnect. Like we'd simply forgotten to text each other back. Not obliterated a relationship with all the warmth of a tax office printer. Then came the killer line. "We've seen the error of our ways." Have you? Have you really? Because unless the error involved casually binning off your own daughter, like an unwanted Groupon voucher, and then ghosting your grandchild, like you were auditioning for EastEnders, The Unforgivable Years, I'm not sure we're on the same page. And me? I just stood there letting them talk, nodding, occasionally raising an eyebrow, but mostly just thinking, is this real life? Is this the part where I'm supposed to melt into a puddle and offer them a cup of tea and forgiveness, wrapped in a jammy Dodger? Because sure, they said all the right things. They looked remorseful. Mum was dabbing at her eyes like she'd just watched The Notebook for the first time, and Dad was doing that stiff, overcompensating nod that said, "I'm here against my will." But someone made me rehearse this in the car. But here's the thing. Forgiveness isn't a vending machine. You don't pop in a "we missed you" and get a redemption arc in return, especially not after 3 years of acting like your own children were just inconvenient. So I smiled. The kind of smile you give when someone cuts you off in traffic, and you fantasize about egging their car. And I said, "Oh, did you now? That's sweet. I missed bin collection day last week." Much the same feeling, I imagine. Mum looked like she'd swallowed her own pearls. Dad blinked like he'd just heard me speak fluent sarcasm for the first time. The toddler, God bless him, farted again, loud and proud. Honestly, he's a prodigy in the art of emotional punctuation. So yeah, they came with a script, with sad eyes and "we've changed" vibes. And maybe some part of them meant it. But me? I'd heard enough "we missed you" to last a lifetime. Now I was more interested in what they planned to do next. So, the universe, in all its twisted humor, decided it was time. Time for my estranged parents to come face to face with the little human they'd pretended didn't exist for 3 years. No warm-up, no easing in, just bam. Here's the child. He eats crayons. He owns our souls. Good luck. They bent down, those two, with the kind of smile middle-class people, reserved for farmers markets and charity auctions. Mum did that voice. You know the one. All sugar and strained vowels. "And what's your name, darling?" Now, let me set the scene. Toddler is wearing a Peppa Pig jumper that's definitely too small. His hair looks like he styled it with a balloon, and he's gripping a half-eaten rice cake like it owes him money. He looks them dead in the face. That sort of stare only toddlers and old people on buses can get away with, and proudly declares, "Mummy," then points at me. Silence. I mean actual silence. Not the polite, awkward kind, no. The "did a piano just fall out of the sky" kind. Mum blinked like her contact lenses had just lied to her. Dad's jaw unhinged slightly. It did this slow, tragic drop like an old barn door that's finally had enough. Me? I sipped my tea like I was in the middle of a BBC drama about intergenerational trauma and long overdue justice. All I needed was a storm in the background and Judi Dench narrating. "Oh," I said casually, swirling the spoon like I was conjuring spirits. He calls me that. I've raised him since day one. Bang. You could actually hear the cognitive dissonance rattling around in their skulls, like 2 hard drives desperately trying to reboot while Windows plays the blue screen of, "Oh God, what have we done?" Mum opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a trout trying to process its taxes. Dad made this tiny grunt, a sort of emotional buffering noise, and I swear his eye twitched. And the toddler? He was already off. He'd found a toy truck, driven it directly into the skirting board. and started narrating an imaginary fire rescue involving a talking biscuit and a dog named Kevin, completely oblivious to the absolute psychological collapse happening 2 feet away. I didn't elaborate, didn't monologue, didn't scream, "Where the hell were you?" because I didn't need to. That one word, Mummy, had done all the heavy lifting. It wasn't just a name. It was a 3-year-long testimony wrapped in toddler defiance and toast crumbs. They'd left. I'd stayed, and the result was staring them in the face, calling me Mum, and asking if Peppa could come to Nana's house, which is both ironic and emotionally devastating, depending on your point of view. So, yeah, that moment, that was mine. Not out of spite, not even revenge, just truth, and for once it didn't hurt. It just felt like peace, if peace came in the form of a sticky child calling you Mom while your parents had an existential crisis over their cuppa. So we're standing in my kitchen. If you can call it standing when the energy feels like we're 5 minutes away from a full-blown EastEnders Christmas special. The kettle's whistling. The toddler is now under the table talking to a raisin like it's his life coach. And my parents? My parents are trying, bless them, to reconcile 3 years of denial with the sight of a child who very clearly didn't just appear via Amazon Prime delivery. Then Dad, ever the detective, finally pipes up, voice all shaky like he's just realized the will might need editing. Wait, where's his father? Boom. It landed like a cold sausage on a fine china plate. Clumsy, greasy, unwanted. I didn't even flinch. Just raised an eyebrow and looked at my sister, who, for the first time in a long time, stood tall. No tears, no shrinking, just this quiet, steady strength that made me want to weep and high-five her at the same time. She cleared her throat and said, "He left. Didn't want a kid." Simple, honest, no frills. No dramatic sob story. Just fact. And Mom gasped. Full hand to chest, clutched the pearls, gasped like someone had just told her. Sainsbury's stopped stocking her favorite rosé. Like this was the first honest sentence she'd heard in years. I nearly applauded. Because let's be real. This was the woman who once told us emotions were best kept in the family biscuit tin with the lid on. So watching her process anything real? Chef's kiss. 10 out of 10. Would emotionally devastate again. And Dad? Oh, sweet oblivious Dad. He just stared. At the kid. At my sister. Back at the kid. His eyes did this slow, horrified squint. And then he muttered, not really to anyone, "But he looks like..." And then silence. Like proper silence. The kind where even the air knows to back the hell off. Because yep, there it was. The big, unspoken, nuclear truth hanging in the air like a passive-aggressive post-it note. Because that child, that chubby-cheeked, Peppa-obsessed whirlwind of crumbs and cuddles, looked suspiciously like someone very, very close to the family. Not just a same eyes kind of thing. No, more like a copy-paste job from someone who turns up at Christmas and drinks all the Baileys kind of resemblance. I watched it happen in real time. Their brains trying to control-Z the thought. And me? I just sipped my tea, slowly. Like I was on the judges panel for Britain's Got Daddy Issues. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came. Mom went a bit pale. The toddler, still under the table, shouted, "Look, my toes!" Because toddlers are nature's comedic timing gods. And I just smiled. Not smug, not cruel. Just tired. Tired in that this family is held together with guilt and passive aggression kind of way. So I said, casually, like we were discussing bin day, "But that's a plot for another day, isn't it?" Then I topped up my tea and left them to stew in the most uncomfortable family resemblance since Cain and Abel. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need a megaphone. Sometimes it just needs a toddler with the wrong nose and perfect timing. You know what they don't tell you about becoming a parent overnight? Besides the constant fear, the sleep deprivation-induced hallucinations, and the fact that children can somehow hear a packet of crisps opening from 3 rooms away, they don't tell you how quietly proud you'll feel. How healing someone else's wounds can accidentally start patching up your own. How standing in for someone else's mother can turn into becoming one. Even if you were just trying to be a decent sister with a kettle and a spare pillow. But let's not go too soft, shall we? Because I didn't forget what they did. How my parents, in all their judgmental Tupperware-tight dignity, disowned their daughter. Like she'd rocked up wearing a Cancel Christmas t-shirt. How they threw out their own flesh and blood like yesterday's casserole because she dared to be human and pregnant without a ring and a mortgage. They disowned her. I rebuilt her. Brick by brick, meltdown by meltdown, takeaway by takeaway. I held her hair back during morning sickness and held her hand during labor, which, by the way, is not nearly as serene as films make it seem. It's more like being front row at the Battle of Helm's Deep. They abandoned a baby. I raised a child. And now that he's cute and verbal and not covered in mashed banana 90% of the time, they want back in. Of course they do. He's gorgeous, bright-eyed, ridiculously funny. He told his nursery teacher I live on coffee and swear words for grown-ups. Which, fair play, he's not wrong. I get it. He's magnetic. He radiates the kind of joy that can only come from being truly loved and never questioned for existing. But here's the bit they can't wrap their perfect little pearls around. They don't get to waltz in now. Not after they ghosted the worst parts and came back. When the nappies were off, and the personality had kicked in. It's like abandoning a flat during renovations, and showing up once the fairy lights are strung and asking for a cuppa. So yeah, I smiled. Let them hold their maybe grandchild. Let Mum pretend she'd always pictured him in her arms. Let Dad sit awkwardly on the sofa, like he's trying to blend into the scatter cushions. But deep down, I knew. They weren't back. They were just visiting. Tourists in a life that could have been theirs. The birthdays. The first words. The night feeds. The garden paddling pool disasters. The tantrums. The magic. But they threw it all away. On principle. On pride. On a warped sense of what family's supposed to look like. And here's what I've learned. Blood doesn't make a family. Effort does. Turning up. Again and again. In the mess. In the hard bits. In the vomit-stained pajamas and the 2 a.m. cries in the council tax letters. You forget to open for 3 weeks straight. Trauma doesn't vanish. It just shapeshifts. Sometimes it becomes art. Sometimes it becomes sarcasm. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it becomes a child calling you. Mummy with a crayon in his ear and jam on his face. So no, I'm not bitter. I just know who's real and who missed their chance.